You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another amazing show line for y'all today. Happy Sunday. This will be out in 2 days, but man, we have a true honor talking to Eric Robinson. He served as an FBI agent, SWAT operator, tactical instructor, and national security investigator, working cases involving terrorism, human intelligence, organized crime, and vulnerable people caught in dangerous situations. 2 of his cases received the Attorney General's Award. But beyond the credentials, Eric brings a rare perspective of judgment, faith, leadership, and what it takes to remain human while confronting some of the darkest realities of society. I'm going to cut right to the chase because we know when you have a show like this, you have some big dogs in here. So we have a big dog, Eric. I want to say, first and foremost, thank you for taking time to clear your calendar. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Shemai. I appreciate you having me on. This should be good.
And small world, you see my Toledo. I'm a passionate alumni of Go Rockets, University of Toledo. He is also has some special connections to the University of Toledo in just Ohio. So I'm already honored to have you on to talk about a little fun stuff there. But before we do that, let's talk about the FBI and that career and also law enforcement. What inspired you to pursue a career in law enforcement and eventually join the FBI?
Well, Shemaya, you buried the lead because part of that was the time that short answer is I needed to find a job that had less stress. The longer answer is I spent 12 years in Christian ministry and I left the pulpit of the Baptist church in 2002 because I just found that working as a pastor, though I enjoyed it, though I did well at it, it was just too hard on me. And that resulted in me having stress headaches every single day for 2 years. So I preached my last sermon on Easter Sunday, 2002. I was in Quantico, Virginia at the FBI Academy the next Sunday. Then the Sunday after that, I was preaching in the academy at the chapel because they didn't have a chaplain and they asked me to fill in. So that was the FBI easing me into law enforcement career.
What is the process really like from the application to being picked to what does it look like? Take us behind the scenes as far as what you can tell.
Yeah, well, it's all online, so it has changed a bit since I came on, but it starts with that application, and this is to be an agent. There's plenty of other support staff positions where you don't carry a gun, but you are integral to investigations. So you got to have a bachelor's degree, at least 3 years in the workplace, so they know you know how to handle yourself. Somewhere between the ages of 24 to under 37, because you got to retire at 57. Go through that. Applicant coordinator looks at it and says, okay, this guy looks like he might be a candidate, moves that on to the next stage. Phase 1 is you take this test that's like the SAT. I take that test and I think, well, at least I tried. FBI calls me back. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect this. And then phase 2 is going to be an oral examination where you're getting asked a number of questions about yourself in the vein of, tell me about a time where you failed and how you managed that and what were the results. At that point, I figured, okay, I can speak. I know how to do this. Written exam, and then you got fit test, where you got to run and do push-ups, background check. I was a passer, so I was pretty clean there. Physical, and then the final, they do the polygraph, and that was the worst. That was the worst 2 hours of my life, soaked in sweat, going through. Polygrapher saying, hey, we're having some troubles here, and so running me through again, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Till he finally says, well, I'm having an issue with you maybe not telling the truth about being an agent of a foreign government. I thought, okay, well, if that's the problem, like, I'm going to ease down because I'm not a spy. And then I passed.
That's amazing. When we watch TV, I mean, it's pretty hot shows out there where it's all law enforcement, FBI, and all that, even medical. What's some of the myths that we see in Hollywood that doesn't really happen the way it usually happens in reality?
Well, we don't have a goth chick who's got a supercomputer that we can call, and then she immediately gives us phone records. So if I enjoy the FBI movies and such, and the things that they show, it can be just as exciting, just as thrilling. And if I tell you about a case of mine, I'm going to give you the highlights, except this case took 16 months. And I'm not telling you about how I'm on the phone with T-Mobile arguing over a subpoena or fighting with an informant who is bugging me. I'm just giving you those highlights. And so, I mean, so much of what goes on in the FBI is a thrill. And then there's long gaps of just doing that grinding work.
You also serve as a SWAT operator for 15 years. What did that experience teach you about staying calm and making clear decisions under intense pressure?
So what was remarkable for me is, as I had gotten some experience as an agent, entered houses, gotten some dangerous situations, then I'm on SWAT and I'm getting regular training. We're training weekly. We're getting many, many more real life scenarios. And when I can see how professional, how competent I'm becoming in my tactics, I'm shooting with great accuracy. We're going through drills. I'm going through houses. I know my role and where to set myself. And then I see all these other guys who are at least as competent as me. What's, I wouldn't say surprising, but fascinating about that is now when we go to a house, we don't know if this criminal is going to oppose us violently. We don't know who else is in there. I'm not afraid because I know what we can do and how high level we are. And that's great because if there's not a buzz back here of, hey, Eric, man, you might get killed. You got to be careful. That's not there. And so then I can be forward focused, just thinking, what's my role? Do I have the tools necessary to carry it out? And then we go. And if you can do that without fear, which I was able to do, which my teammates were able to do, it made you even better on top of being so professional and well-trained.
And speaking of fear, is there any point dealing with missions where you experience fear, but you have a way to get over it and still execute? How does that look like in training?
Well, it comes from just having been there. So I can tell you the closest I would say to fear was an occasion where we had a barricaded subject. We had a woman who was on a mental break. Her 10-year-old son was with her in an apartment. We came on and relieved a SWAT team before us and set up. I was with a team of 8 SWAT operators just down the hall, ready to break into the door and we had 2 triggers, if she either fired a shot or threatened her 10-year-old son. Meanwhile, we just let the negotiators work. We're working together. They're with us. They're trying to do their job. But if we got that trigger to enter, we were going to go. The woman had said, if anybody tries to enter, bring body bags because I'm going to kill you. And at some point, the negotiators trying to get a better communication with her sent a robot down the hallway. She didn't like that and fired a shot through her door at the robot. And I look back at my team leader and I go, hey, man, that's a shot. Are we going? And eventually they talked it over, decided, well, she's still not threatening her kid. We'll stand down for a moment. But I remember thinking, we're about to go through this. It's called a fatal funnel, this narrow doorway with only one way in. And I wasn't afraid, but I was pretty sobered by thinking, I'm probably going to get shot and that's not going to feel good, but we have to go. That turned out where we were relieved by another team. And within 5 minutes, while we're trying to peel off our gear on a hot summer afternoon, 2 shots rang out. One was her firing at a sniper out her window, and the sniper firing back and ending the barricade.
Once again, you listen to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Eric Robinson, who served as FBI agent, SWAT operator, tactical instructor, and also national security investigator. Man, you have a website, breacher.com, that people can go check out. How did you come up with that name?
That's one that we had kicked around for so long. So, having been unique where I had not met people who went from the pulpit into the FBI, that was always a joke that we would kick around. It's cute because it rhymes, but we regularly do trainings or meet new agencies, new officers, and guys would always go like, "Hey man, guess what that guy used to do before he got in?" Because I have a joking way, and so it doesn't seem like this guy who's a SWAT operator smoking a cigar is unlikely to have been a Baptist pastor before, so that usually surprised people.
When you think about the public lens, there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to operations and split second decisions. What should people understand about how important your job is, as far as not just safety for the public, but also eliminating threats?
Yeah, the Department of Justice has always had a simplified deadly force policy, which is an officer may engage in deadly force if there's an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm to myself or someone around from another person. Since then, there's been a number, past 3-4 years, of addendums that go with it to clarify rendering aid, stopping officers who may be acting against someone's civil rights. So those are put in, those are read before every operation. So agents in the FBI are well trained on when they can engage in deadly force. And I would just say, and now as a civilian, as I've come out, I have to remind myself that when you see instances of police shootings or their involvements that seem untoward or unprofessional, I just wait to understand the full concept. It can still be that police acted wrongly, but there's much more that goes on that, given that outside perspective where somebody's just watching, it's much different than an agent or an officer's perspective who is one-on-one dealing with a person. So that deadly force policy is reckoned in the perspective of the officer. Did I feel this? Is that a reasonable belief that there was imminent threat of serious bodily harm or death?
You also work in human intelligence and recruited confidential informants. How do agents build trust with someone who may have every reason to not trust the government? Yeah,
we seek out informants who are going to be well placed. So we're looking for people who are near targets of our subjects or would have access to information through the people that they know. I've had informants who come from other nations where they grew up with the king or, military. So now, years later, they can have some insight or some connections that are profitable to the United States government. And then they have to be consistent and they have to be reliable. So that's a part of what we test along the way. If guys are not reliable, if we think that their information is not true, they'll get cut loose. But I'm also making sure I recognize and remember that these are, other than the criminals just working off time, men and women who don't have to help us. They're force multipliers in helping us get our job done, but they're doing this almost exclusively just out of wanting to help the country. They get a little money, it's not worth it, and they get a little excitement of action, and sometimes that's more of a motivation, but that patriotism is usually what drives most of the informants.
How do you determine whether an informant is credible or manipulative or frightened when you're trying to execute the mission?
Well, I'm always trying to be upfront and make sure the informant knows all the liabilities. So if I'm sending them into a place that's dangerous to any degree, I'm letting them know how I evaluate that. I had one informant who did so well, rised up in the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan. He went to a rally where we couldn't give coverage, so he was on his own. He comes back and he says, "Yeah, man, they jumped me because they wanted to see how he would react to a fight." And I go, "Bro, I'm sorry." And he goes, "No, man, that's awesome. Won that fight. That guy's breathing out of his nose crooked now. So that was great. That was fun." But otherwise, there are regular testings that we have on informants where, we'll set them up to say, "Hey, can you translate this for me?" and see if they're going to change things because it's derogatory to their own people. Things of that nature. Follow them to see if they're actually going to where we said we want them to go. Otherwise, it's the same way as if you and I are friends. And how do I know to trust you? It's how you react over time and how are you responding. It's very similar to that kind of relationship.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio and watching us online. Talk to Eric Robinson. Go to his website, preachertobreacher.com. My next question, without revealing sensitive information, can you tell us a little bit about how FBI handles tips? Because we always kind of see that on the news or in media. And without, revealing too much, what can you tell us?
So tips, it used to be that agents would be on duty as a complaint agent and the public calls in. And so myself and maybe a couple of support staff field the calls, try to evaluate. A lot of people call in that they have psychological problems. A lot of people provide tips that maybe are criminal, but aren't federal violations or don't rise up to a level where we would investigate. People call in and say, "Hey, I saw this guy in a pickup truck acting strange." You're like, "Okay, I can't do anything about that." Now we have the National Threat Operations Center where people call in and you've got a whole squad of folks who take those evaluations, pass it on as best as they can determine the division that's supposed to handle that. And, here's recontact numbers. Here's a background that we did quick and dirty on the possible subject. And then we get those leads and we're going through them to evaluate like if this is true, would we even charge it? And so many of them are just cleared by a quick interview. Do a little background, see where it might be. I'll get a lead where, some guy's on Xbox Live and says something about black people and harming them. I'm like, okay, man, like
that's playing 2K.
Yeah, that's probably the least that's going on right there. Other people on Twitter, saying stuff. You're like, oh my gosh. And so you just end up at the front door and say, "Hey, man, if you don't like the FBI coming to your door, I get it. Stop saying inflammatory things online because now we got to handle it. We can't just dismiss it wholly. Somebody does something about it, even if it's in a minor measure."
What separates productive interrogation from one that causes a subject to shut down?
What's a method that makes them shut down? The trope of coming in and slamming the table and yelling at them. And I've seen agents do that, but I never felt like I needed to play bad cop, because when I come to your house and I tear down your door, me and 15 buddies point rifles at you and put handcuffs on you and say, "I'm going to take you to jail." If I have to prove that I'm in charge beyond that, you're missing the point. So after I've done that, I'm going to try, I'm not yelling. And the church that I planted, I based it on being non-judgmental, of accepting people, making sure folks felt welcomed. And if I brought that to an interrogation where it doesn't matter if you're a sex offender, drug dealer, whatever it is, I'm showing no judgment. I'm going to leave that judgment for the court where it's going to hit you harder than me saying you disgust me or yelling about stuff. We'll talk about the evidence. We'll talk about facts. But otherwise, this back and forth, I'm taking it to a familiar place, just like this conversation, where your mind tricks you into thinking this is not threatening. In the back of your head, you're remembering, yeah, I'm going to go to court someday. But right now, this ends up being the most important thing. And people are just foolish to not focus on what actually is the most important. And so they I show you respect, and then you show me respect. I answer your questions, and then you find yourself answering mine. And so just being polite, kind, and normal is usually what's going to break people down more than slamming a phone book.
When you think about your experience with national security and think about interrogation on that level, you interrogated terrorism suspects. What part of that makes you say, wow, I got to prepare myself mentally and be strategic in this conversation? And how much by the book do you have to go?
Well, every interrogation, every post-arrest interrogation or interview of a subject leading up, I'm studying for an exam. And I think most agents do the same. So I'm going through the details. If it's not my case, I'm reading through the file. If we're going to arrest like 6 people, I may be asked to interrogate somebody that I wasn't involved in this case. So I'm reading through and I'm having that memorized. I've got notes. I've got a plan of attack. And that way I can just keep my head up without looking like an idiot and start flipping through papers. We will do interrogations typically with 2 agents. So going to coordinate ahead of time. Hey, I'm going to be lead. You take notes. You observe what's going on. You're going to be my wingman and you're going to go, okay, let's come back to this. He seemed to act strange. Or instead of breaking into my path, like you're just ready to jump in later. I'm going to finish, turn to you. You're going to have a few questions. And I've found that works best. I've seen enough times and I've been a part where I've got a good train that I'm going on. You come in with a great idea and it is a good one, but it's not on my path. And now 2 agents start wrestling over control. So just having that focused attack usually works best.
2 of your cases receive Attorney General's Award, the Attorney General's Award. What made that investigation or those investigations especially meaningful or challenging for you?
Well, the first one was challenging because we had a civil rights case on Chicago Police Commander John Burge. And this was a man who had allegedly, and his crew, tortured mainly black males in the Chicago area for years. And my buddy Jake had the case. I came onto it, and we were taking on a case that was 25 years old. We reinitiated the case because a few years prior, one of those victims was tortured, sued Burge civilly in federal court. And in federal court, he said that he had no knowledge of torture. So just like Al Capone getting caught for tax evasion, we went after him for perjury and obstruction of justice. And this is for acts that he committed in the 70s and 80s. These victims that we interviewed were all prisoners. Like they were guys, they're convicts. And many of them, most of them, had actually done the things that they were tortured to admit to. One telling me like, hey, I missed my mother's funeral because I was locked up and these guys tortured me until I confessed. And I said, did they make you say something you didn't do? I was very curious. And he goes, no. I mean, I did it, but I never would have admitted to it. And I thought, all right, I'm not going to give you sympathy for spending time in prison, but police can't torture. You can't coerce a confession in that manner. And so we ended up getting Burge in a case that was long overdue. The FBI had not done its job for years. The Chicago police did not do the job for years. And we got a modicum of justice out of that. So that one was particularly challenging, but we got our time out of it.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching this online, talking to our guest today, Eric Robinson. You go to his website, preachertobreacher.com. And we're going to have to extend this for overtime for the podcast. But for the radio, if people want to learn more about you and any other additional resources you have, how best can they find out what you're up to?
Well, yeah, my website, A Preacher to Breacher. It was great. I got to be a preacher, and then later I was a guy who knocked down doors, so it fit aptly. You can find me on Instagram at _Eric_Robinson, or on LinkedIn, you type in Eric Robinson and FBI, you see this face, and connect with me that way. That's good.
Perfect. And we're going to extend this for the podcast. I have a couple more questions for you. There's a big thing that is always being talked about when you think about young people and them being sexually exploited. What should the public understand about protecting the vulnerable youth?
There's a lot of ways that predators get in on with kids and groom them or solicit them. I have found, and I apply this because as a parent, I learned this, there has to be a connection with your children early of, 7, 8, 9, where you're comfortable, they're comfortable with you, to the point where now as they get older and they get devices with internet connection, that you have established this normalcy of having them tell you when things are odd or different, having a normalcy where this is just what mom and dad do, go through their phone or their tablet to search through things. When you try to do that when they're 16 and they've already had 4 or 5 years of privacy on there, now it's a difficult thing to initiate when it seems like that's a punishment. But if it's established early where, dad can look at your tablet, make sure people aren't messaging them inappropriately, now it becomes more customary. I had a case where a 13-year-old boy had been groomed by a 27-year-old man, and that resulted in them meeting regularly and kind of going on dates, and until the man assaulted him. And that was found by the parents checking his tablet and seeing how the man had taken him from one social media platform to say, hey, go to Kick. We're going to message you directly. They see these messages and, the worst thing that a parent's going to find out. So that's a usual tactic for some of these predators.
You also, being in ministry, you have principles that you learned throughout your whole career. What are some of the spiritual principles that has kept you grounded and that you find valuable in your field?
So when I got into the FBI, not only was I learning how to do law enforcement as a new career, but I was trying to understand this huge 100-year-old agency of the FBI, all the administration, all the different aspects to it. After 24 years, I figured out most of it because there's so much that's there. And while I'm doing that, and while I'm a guy who had never touched a gun before, and I'm skipping rounds off the ground, and I'm trying to catch up to my peers, by the time we hit the field, now I was up on them, because no matter what type of weapons we have, technology, computers, judicial process, it's going to be person to person at some point where I'm interviewing people and getting the most out of them. I'm working informants and getting the most out of them, or having to confront the criminals. And I had spent 12 years in ministry knowing how to deal with people, sitting with someone, being non-judgmental, knowing how to draw them out, having been practiced in listening, being curious. I had, even though this is in some ways contrary to some Christianity, I had come not with answers of, hey, here's a Bible verse that addresses it, now we're done, but still being open to saying, I can learn more about this and it's going to be best for me and for you. So all of those aspects, some of them were just part of who I was, but I practiced those in ministry, and that was so useful and necessary when I got into the FBI of getting the most out of people.
My last question for you is, with law enforcement remaining as a major part of the national conversation, we always see in headlines, we always see people's opinions. What changes do you believe would improve the public trust and also officer effectiveness?
Well, there's the FBI only got body cameras about 2.5 years ago. And actually our division, our SWAT team, was the first in the FBI to be involved in a shooting with body cameras. And that was 2 years ago now. And we were late to that. There's a principle that many police officers bring to each day, such as with roll call. I know in the FBI, we've been guilty of this too, and that is just come home safe. So aspects of that are good. Obviously, you want to do that, but it fosters an us versus them mentality, which is completely contrary to the protect and serve. So if I come to you and my first reaction, or I begin foundationally with, I'm opposing you, you're a threat to me, it's difficult to be a public servant when that is your initial position that has to be overcome. And so I think there are many manners where a police officer can still be vigilant and professional, ready to engage, ready to put someone down, handcuff them, wrestle them, without coming in big-chested and brutish. It's still possible. It's not either or. I don't have to come in establishing dominance. I think police officers, FBI agents forget that when we just show up on scene, we are dominant. Like just being me with a gun, with training, with authority that you don't have, that's a position over someone else. And so that can be threatening. We need to understand that and condescend in many ways to the public. And again, as we talked with some of those ministry practices, I think that opens people up to now being in a better state of mind and position too.
One more thing as we wrap up this conversation is young people who are watching this and listening to this right now, do your recruiting, man. If they're interested and they want to have a career in the FBI and law enforcement in general, what would be your words of wisdom?
Do it. I mean, if you feel like that's your way. I know you and I were talking before about, you're like, Marine Corps might have been something, but it just didn't feel right for me. Like, if this might not be right, but even with the FBI, you don't have to be a gun toter. There are just as many positions as analysts and other spots. I mean, heck, we got guys who work in the auto body for us. We got tech agents who wire things up and do crazy stuff for us, and they don't, get into the face of danger. So the FBI is a great organization full of talented, professional, dedicated, intelligent people who look to do what's right. There's a few that aren't, of course, but these are the best people that I've been around. So since I've gotten out of the FBI, that's when I got on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I used to just use them to troll bad guys and see what they're up to. And I've probably had maybe not quite a dozen young people connect with me and want to know more about the FBI. I'm like, yep. So, I mean, if people are listening and they want to know about it, hit me up on LinkedIn and I'll have a long conversation about what you need to do to prepare and what the career is like.
That was really going to be my follow-up question. How easy is it to approach someone who's in the FBI, or is there rules that you should be going through some other channels?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. For me, I'm always open. I'll tell you all day. I never lost this fascination of, are you kidding me? I get to do this? This is amazing. This is the FBI. I had a buddy who went to Princeton, and he told me once, he's like, yeah, I see on social media, like all my buddies from college, they're CEOs and doctors. Yeah, they're doing amazing stuff. And I said, buddy, you're on an FBI SWAT team. They all wish they could be you. Don't be looking at them. They wish they were you. So I'm glad to tell people, I'll talk to them. You'll always find agents like that. You'll find some that don't. If people, like generally, if they're not reaching out to me, if they want to know, they can always contact their applicant coordinator in their area. Just look things up on the FBI and ask if they can get a chance to speak with an agent. The applicant coordinator will probably do that, just give you some time of what this is like, and you get that understanding. I had years ago, if you got time for a quick story, years ago, I'm on the SWAT team. We finish an operation. I'm talking to my buddy Travis. It's getting near Easter, and I said, hey, Travis, what are you doing for Easter? And he said, well, we're going to go back to Jamestown, New York to visit my in-laws. And that's where I pastored a church. And I said, what's their last name? Because I know most of the families there. And he tells me the last name. And right there, I realized 8 years prior, a pastor friend reached out to me when I'm in the FBI. He said, hey, my future son-in-law is thinking about getting in the FBI. Can he give you a call? I said, sure. Talk to this kid for an hour. Tell him it's a great job. Had no idea that years later I'd be serving on a SWAT team next to that guy. Just out of the blue, here he comes, and we never would have found out if I didn't just ask, some small talk of what are you doing for Easter. That's awesome. He would have gotten in anyway, but me getting a chance to talk to someone and they being in this career now, that felt good to be able to do.
Like I said in the green room, small world, man.
Small world.
This was an excellent conversation. Like always, been listening on Refocused Radio and talking to our guest today, Eric Robinson. Go to his website, preachertopreacher.com. Like always, sir, thank you for your time, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Shemaiah.